So welcome to the district.
Thank you.
Where'd you come from?
Just recently came from Tumwa, so
Okay.
I've been there for the past 4 years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, jump right in.
An option.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Just like go slow, form relationships. It's like you have
No.
to to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Should be, that was the backup microphone.
Yep. How's your family doing?
One's a little perturbed about show play.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It is. It is what it is. I mean, yeah, I heard marching band was done. Yeah. Yeah. No. And as the letter that went out said, we're still having show play. Like, still have class, it'll still be, but it'll just be in a different form. My hypothesis would
So
be.
good morning, everyone.
So, yeah.
Good morning. Thank you. It is 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. If you are on Zoom, can you give a thumbs up if you can hear us clearly and hear us well, please? Those of you on Zoom, can you hear? I see one wave. Anybody else? Can everybody hear clearly on Zoom? Thumbs up, a wave, some indication? On the way in, you should have been able to take a picture of a QR code. Those of you, do you want me to unmute this, Justin? It says unmute, no? Those of you that are online, if you can just make sure you look in the chat, and there's going to be a QR code to get some feedback. There was also note cards if you prefer that method with pencils to be able to put some questions later on in the session. We're really happy you're here today. We appreciate you coming and attending. The goal of this is to get your feedback, to help us finalize some decisions. Also, the goal is to answer some of your questions to ensure that you feel safe for whatever method of instruction you prefer for your child for the fall. So today, we're going to start with, the first part is we're going to go through some data from the family engagement survey that was given a couple weeks ago. We're also going to talk about some health and safety aspects that we put into place. And then we're going to go through our current draft plans that we have for elementary, middle school, and high school. I want to stress that these plans are still being worked on. We're working, of course, in these feedback sessions and getting your feedback. We're also working with staff members on finalizing some of those details and results at this time.
They can't hear on Zoom. Did she need to unmute?
Yeah, she did. I mean, yes. Are you unmuted? Sorry. Your audio, your. Yes, you should be able to hear. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to try this again. Can everybody on Zoom hear me now? Now oh good, that's why I didn't hear. Thank you. I'm seeing some head nods, thumbs up. So my guess is that you guys did not hear anything I started with, so I'm going to start over. Is it echoing, or can you hear clearly? It's kind of echoing in here. It's echoing.
It's echoing.
It's
There's a
echoing.
bit of disturbance and sometimes we can't hear you.
Make sure Ryan, you're muted, please.
Okay, I'm going to test again. Testing. Testing. Now you can't hear me at all. Testing again. So somebody's muting me. I know, but watch. So I'll start talking and then somebody will mute me. But you may want to mute me, but please do not.
I think we're in.
Okay, just keep watching because it will happen. Is there still an echo? Yes. A little bit of an echo. Please, if you're on Zoom and you can't hear clearly, stop me.
It's coming through the computer and the microphone at the same time.
Maybe he doesn't want me to mute him. Right here? Yep. My volume's all the way off. Correct. I'm hearing myself. myself twice, so they have to.
That's through here, so that is not going through Zoom.
Thank you all for your patience as we figure out this technical difficulty.
Keep
I'm gonna
talking.
keep talking. Craig, go ahead, sorry.
There you go. Now your mute should be out of mute.
So I couldn't hear Craig because he was muted. Is this better? I don't hear an echo. Can all of you hear me? Thumbs up, nodded heads. Yes, excellent. Hey, I think we fixed it. Perfect. So thank you all for being here. Good morning. I'm Nicole Quaker, Deputy Superintendent of Cedar Rapids. We are so glad that you're here today. The goal of our session today is to provide an overview of what our plan is at this time. It is a draft plan, which is why we're still collecting feedback from families, community members, in addition from staff members. The goal is to have a finalized version ready by the end of next week. So today in our session, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the family engagement survey data that was collected from many of you first. We're also going to go through some health and safety aspects that the district is addressing at this time. And then we're going to cover our current draft plans for elementary, middle school, and high school. And with those plans, parents do have options of whether you will be sending your child back to school face-to-face or whether you prefer the virtual model at this point in time. We believe that that's a priority. I think that's really important. In the second part of our session, we're going to give you guys a little bit of time, 5 to 10 minutes, to fill out either your note cards that we will be collecting here if those are you in person, and all of you online should have in your chat where you can access this full slideshow. In addition, fill out that QR code, and we're going to be in that 5 to 10 minutes getting those note cards and those QR questions put together so we can address and answer those questions. If you have some specific detailed questions, our answer at this point in time, maybe you don't have answers yet, but we will be getting those answers to you in the very near future. I also want to stress that we are going to have an FAQ document that will be available online starting tomorrow. We've been getting lots of questions. So if you have questions, most likely somebody has asked a lot of those, and that document will be available for you to view. And we will be adding to that as we make decisions here in the next couple of weeks. The third part of the session is we will share the next steps in the timeline that aligns with what's happening here with Return to Learn. Covering some of the Cedar Rapids priorities, first and foremost is the health and safety of our students, staff, and families. So in all the decisions we've been making, that is our number one priority. We have also, of course, been prioritizing education, equity, and opportunity for all students, which is why we wanted to provide choice for families. We know that a one-size-fits-all model doesn't necessarily work for everyone within the system. And the fourth priority is listening to staff and families and making the best plans for our students and staff here in Cedar Rapids. I'm sure as you've listened to the news, social media, etc., you know that different schools are doing some different plans, and it's all based on community, family, and staff needs in those locations. Across the state, Governor Reynolds and the Department of Education had us submit 3 different plans by July 1st. So we had to be prepared for a fully virtual option, a face-to-face option, and a hybrid option. And I'm going to stress when we say face-to-face, it does look different than it has in the past, as we're all sitting here, of course, wearing facial PPE and wearing these masks today. So we have put additional layers of safety and security in place for students to return in the fall. On the family engagement survey that was done a couple of weeks ago, we had the total of 5,157 responses. These engagement surveys were emailed and texted to families, and they were translated to their preferred language. From the results, and again, I know things change over the course of time, but 54% of families were comfortable sending their students back to school. 36% were unsure, which is why we need to answer more questions, and 11% were not comfortable at that point in time. As you can see on this next slide, this is just the graphic that breaks down, could these learning options work? On-site, hybrid, and at home. And then on the right-hand side is a circle graph, Just with the data I covered, 54% were comfortable, 36% unsure, and 11% were no at that point in time. The top concerns of families based on the survey data, the first one was students getting and spreading COVID-19. The second one was not being able to social distance at school. The third one was school cleanliness. The fourth one was school closing again. And the fifth one was readiness to move to the next grade level, especially since students have been out since March. If you look at this timeline, last week we gave staff feedback sessions, and we also sent out a family engagement survey, and we also sent out a staff survey. This week, we spent some time with the Cedar Rapids Education Association. We're doing various work groups with different groups of staff. In addition, we're having these family and community feedback sessions. There's 2 today. And just to promote tomorrow, the location has changed due to a water main break with some electrical snafus, I should say, and we have moved that to Taft. So tomorrow the sessions will be at Taft, and we are putting that out through social media and through all of our communication channels. The week of the 27th, this will be the big week, that our district is going to be sharing the finalized return to learn plans. We'll also ask you to begin indicating at that point in time, you'll be getting a survey, how your students will want to come back to school, which option they're going to choose. You will have more details, of course, before you make that decision. But once we can identify what students are making their choices and families, we can then work with placing staff in the various needed locations or in that virtual environment as well. So between the 27th of July and August 5th, which is coming up quickly, our goal is to know from all families and from all staff how they plan to return to school and what that's going to look like in the fall, and have that solidified plan in place. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Executive Director John Rice to talk about some teaching and learning aspects.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Quaker, and you start by saying thank you to all of you that have, thank you to all of you who have taken time to come here today. We're facing a school year unlike any other we've ever faced, with challenges that are different than we've ever faced. And we appreciate you taking time to come today and give us your feedback and help partner with us to solve and think through some of these very challenging aspects of a year unlike any in recent times. As with all districts across the country right now, Cedar Rapids is facing a difficult, complex decision about how schools reopen. And if you've been following the news nationally, you've seen that schools across the country are approaching this very differently. And here in Iowa, we have a lot of direction from the state on how we should reopen, and we saw those 3 different plans available: in person, hybrid, and virtual. Here's what we know about all of those plans. There's challenges with all of them. None of them are perfect. None of them are going to be like school was last year, and there's no great solution that's going to work well for everyone. And so knowing that it's going to be a challenging year, and no matter which plan we have, there's going to be some trade-offs, we want to talk through what some of those trade-offs could be, and also give parents a choice. You don't have to have a one-size-fits-all for the entire city of Cedar Rapids. We know that families are in different spots and may need different options based on their needs, and so a big design element for us has been family choice. So I want to talk about how we've designed some of our models and some of those main things, and then I'm going to turn it over to each level director, elementary, middle, and high school, to talk more specifics about their plans. So our current draft models have been designed around the following parameters. We started with, what does it mean to have a safe environment for our students and our staff in Linn County?
Hardly here.
Thank you. I'll hunch over a little too.
Yeah, perfect.
Or do this. Even better. So we've worked with Linn County Public Health and other health agencies to determine what it would mean to have a safe opening for our schools, for our students and staff, and we have some parameters we're going to share on that. Secondly, as I mentioned, we want to have options for families, knowing that there's not one single option. And third, we really want to limit interaction between staff and students. If there's an outbreak, we want to limit it to as few number of people as possible, and that helps keep staff and students safe. So up on the screen, you'll see some of the main safety procedures we're putting in place. And that first one is parental and guardian choice. If families are choosing in person versus virtual, and we know a lot of people are going to choose a virtual option, that does lower the number of people who are going to be in a building at any one given time. And so that helps us keep our ratios of interactions in person quite low if we have people choosing the virtual option. So that parental choice keeps families that need to be fully at home safe and keeps our numbers here in the building a little smaller as well. Secondly, masks and face shields are going to be required at all times for our staff and students. Masks and or face shields, let me clarify. There's of course going to be health accommodations as needed and age appropriate breaks where needed, but this safety preventative measure is going to help limit the spread of any disease. And then you can see some of the other things in there about sanitation, which will be increased tremendously this year on our buses, in our classrooms, in our common spaces, and social distancing within our classrooms and our other spaces as much as possible to, again, limit those interactions. As we get into the draft plans, each level, elementary, middle, and high school, is going to have at least one in-person option and at least one virtual option, and some of the levels have additional virtual options. I'm going to talk about the virtual options more in depth during the Q&A because that's a very common question and walk through that. But with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Christensen to share about elementary school first.
Thank you, John. And as John stated, I'm Eric Christensen, the Executive Director of Elementary Education. Nice to see all of you today. Basically, at the elementary right now, what we're looking at is a virtual or an on-site decision. And parents, you are going to have a decision. You're going to have a choice in that matter. I guess at the elementary level, what I can tell you right now is we have two big things we're working on. One is that 20-to-1 ratio. That is a number that continues to surface from students, from families, from staff. I can't tell you at this point in time because we need your input on, or your decision on what you're going to do with your child. Are you going to send them on site? Or are you going to opt out for the virtual, which is fine. Once that data is in, then I will be working with elementary principals and looking at configuring class size and how we're going to attempt to do this. The other big rock is specials. Art, music, and PE. What do we do there? There is a team that's working on that. Do we do virtual specials? Do we do live specials? How does that work? As some of you know, we have a comprehensive master's special schedule throughout our elementary schools, all 21. So we'll be working on that schedule and coming up with some options. As Nicole mentioned, we are working with the Cedar Rapids Education Association. They are part of this process. So we are really going to be determining what is the best option for kids in terms of art, music, and gym. Actually, another meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, so stay tuned on that one. Those are really the two big ones at elementary right now, specials and the ratio. And again, once that data comes in from our families across the city, we'll be able to start working on that. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Zimmerman, who is the Executive Director of Middle School.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As others have mentioned, we have had lots of feedback over the last 2 weeks. We had over 1,000 educators weigh in on this plan. We have lots and lots of families weigh in this week. We're taking the feedback. If anyone says this plan is baked, they are lying because we're taking feedback and trying our best to accommodate where we can and make a plan that works for as many people as we possibly can. So thank you for your feedback today and taking the time to be with us. Our plan is very similar to the elementary plan. We're also in cohorts. 20-to-1 is our goal. Unlike the elementary schools, we do have 3 options instead of just 2. As you'll see, we have the in-person option, and then we have 2 virtual options. The Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy, which is the year-long program, and then the virtual option, remote learning, which we're calling it. All are good options. You'll have to pick and see which is right for your family. In terms of the school model, like elementary school, we're going to limit the number of kid-to-kid interaction, and hopefully kid-to-staff member interaction as well. This is based on the Linn County Public Health Guidance. We know that the more kids, the more adults, an individual is exposed to, the more likely it is that we'll have spread. So we're limiting that in this model. For middle school students, and teachers, this is going to be different, and we know that. But safety is the primary priority, and we want to stay true to that as we go through this. I'm so grateful for our principals, Mrs. Rasak here, and then the other 5 in middle schools who are working with their staffs and teachers to come up with a plan that works for all our employees and our kids. The things we have to work on, very similar to elementary again. The primary thing is the special schedule. How are we going to continue to limit exposure for those teachers and students while also meeting the other demands of the school day? So that's our big struggle right now. If you have suggestions, we too are meeting, taking more feedback on how to get this done. But your feedback is very valued. Thank you for being here. With that, I'll turn it over to Cynthia Phillips, our Executive Director of High School.
Good morning, everyone. I want to do a mic check and make sure that I am able to be heard. I will continue, and you'll have to let me know if there's audio issues. Looking okay? Okay, awesome. My name is Cynthia Phillips. I'm Executive Director for High Schools. Thank you for attending this feedback session. We appreciate it. And so I'd like to review the high school draft plan at this point and share a bit of the complexity at the high school level due to the number of students that we have in our high school buildings on any day. Also the number of courses that our master schedules offer, and wanting to try to maintain all the options and opportunities that we can for high school students, including additional programming that is both on campus in lab type setting classrooms and off campus in some of those programs. We also have to consider the certifications of our staff. At the high school level, there are specific certifications that staff members have to have in order to be able to teach certain classes, and therefore being able to offer those classes to students requires that we've got the staff available to teach them. And then finally, we are supporting our students in earning credits toward graduation and ultimately supporting their pathway into whatever post-secondary plans they have. So maintaining those options and opportunities for them to get the courses and experiences that they need in this pandemic are some of the complexities that we've been working through at the high school level. So with that, the draft plan that we've put forward is an A-B block schedule. And so an A-B block means that their 8-period day is spread over 2 days. And so an A day would have periods 1 through 4, a B day would have periods 5 through 8. So students would take 3 to 4 classes on an A day, and students would take 3 to 4 classes on a B day. Staff would teach 3 classes each of those days and have a prep period each of those days. In the particular draft phase that we're proposing the A-B day model, but we're also proposing it in a cohort model in order to split the student body in half so that we never have more than 50% capacity in any of our buildings on any given day. And so in this particular case, what we look at is cohort 1 would attend their A day on Monday and their B day on Tuesday, and they would be in online learning Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Cohort 2 would attend their A day on Wednesday, their B day on Thursday, and they would be in online learning, let's say Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. And so that's the particular draft that we put forth, again, in order to minimize the number of bodies in a high school building on any given day to less than 50%. This also cuts in half the number of students in a classroom in any period throughout the day. It also cuts in half the passing period during school days, and so reducing passing periods. It also allows us, excuse me, to, as a staff and student, to focus on 3 to 4 classes in each day, instead of maybe having to try to balance 7 or 8 classes in one day, especially knowing the unique circumstances and the online learning component that goes with it. And so the in-person model and then the online model mimics that in-person model. And so, for instance, in order for students and teachers to be able to take the courses that they need to take and teachers to teach the classes that they need to teach, this particular draft, students would still sign up for their courses through their high school, and they would be able to access those same courses online. They can remote in on their cohort days. And what we've tried to do is put a structure in place where in that 90-minute class period, there would be less than 15 students, and some may be in person and some may be remoted in. And then working through the supports on what that might look like in regards to instructional planning. There is also another online option at the secondary level, and that's Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy, and that would be for anyone looking for a fully accredited online secondary school, and that would be all at your own pace and flexibility. Really, you're in charge of your learning as you go through those online classes. And so that is an option also. So really there's three primary things to consider at the high school level in this particular draft model. And those are the reasons why we're proposing this at this time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Craig Barnum and I'm the Executive Director of Digital Literacy and Information Technology for the district. Thank you all for coming and giving us your feedback on today's plan. From Mylands organization, we're supplying the tools and the hardware that are going to make a lot of the virtual opportunities go this fall if we need to go that way, and for those who choose that. So we'll do a level by level breakdown of kind of what we've got available, and then give you a couple things to think about if you want to ask questions or give us input, which would be helpful just as everybody else is asking for. At the high school level, as many of you know probably, we gave out Chromebooks to all high schoolers last fall, the fall of 2019. And we had available a number of hotspots through a grant with Sprint, and we'll continue to have those for families who do not have access to internet at home. At the middle school, our 5-year tech plan called for us to roll out one-to-one Chromebooks at all of our middle school students this year, and we're on target to do that. Those devices are waiting at the buildings for your child. They've been signed, inventory, ready to go. We also have an additional 350-ish hotspots available for families who may not have internet at home to support virtual learning. We also did some significant network upgrades to make sure that when we're on site, the devices perform as we would expect them to. The elementary plan is really where things changed quite a bit. We didn't have any plans to do a whole lot with elementary this year. The roadmap, 5-year roadmap, called for us to give one device out for every 2 kids in the fall of 2021. But given the circumstances, we decided that we needed to pivot reasonably fast to meet the needs of any potential closure that may happen in the 2021 school year. And so we shuffled some resources around and got creative and found a way to provide a Chromebook for every 1st through 5th grader and an iPad for every preschooler and kindergartner. Those devices were ordered in June, and most of them are actually here already. We're starting to work on getting them deployed to buildings, and that's underway, which is exciting. To be crystal clear about those devices, the thought process at this point is that the devices will stay at school in classroom sets. They won't be coming home with children, unless a family has chosen a virtual option, in which case someone would send it home. In the case of a school closure or a district closure, we would also send the devices home. But the big idea is that it's just more additional devices at the school for each child. At the same time, we also purchased another slug of hotspots to cover any families who might need support with that over the course of this year. And I have those available at the elementary level as well. You can see we've got about 1,500 available there. We are currently working on network infrastructure upgrades too, same sort of thing. We want to make sure the devices work really well when our teachers and our students hit the buildings. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Here are a couple of things we're thinking about, and really the key area here is that we're focused on learning at this point. We want to make sure that we're providing the right learning for our teachers and our administrators to work within this new environment. That's, as you might imagine, a really significant challenge. But we're making progress trying to get things tightened up so that we have reasonably clear plans and learning plans for how to get them there. The other idea here is that we really are interested in trying to get feedback on what you would think are foundational skills for parents, guardians, and kids, so that we can start getting a little bit ahead of that as well. So any input you have there would be very, very helpful. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Wendy Parker.
Hi, good morning. Wendy Parker. I am the Executive Director for Special Services for the district. Really the cornerstone of planning for the fall around special education students will be what is called a remote learning plan. This is an individual plan that we will be creating for every student in our district who has an IEP, which represents over 2,300 students in our district. If you are a parent of a student who receives special education services, you can plan to be contacted by your roster teacher here in the next couple of weeks to set up that meeting. Within that meeting, we'll be looking at what do things look like to start the school year if you, as a family, choose 100% virtual, which you're able to do for students in special education as well. We also want to talk about what do special education services look like for your child in the way that we will be doing face-to-face. And then we also want to make sure we have a plan for your child if we were to go virtual at any point, even for a short period of time or a longer period of time. So we will be planning for all that. We know in special education we have a lot of unique circumstances. We serve a lot of students with a lot of different needs. And so we are working hard to make sure that we have safety in place, things that are safe, also being responsive to all the individual needs of the students that we do serve. I have added an overview of our special education services on the chat, as well as a question and answer page. There's also a hard copy there in the room, and we will also have that on our website so you can access it there. Thank you.
All right, now as we, can you hear me on Zoom? There we go. Now is the critical piece, and this is the time we're asking you for your feedback. So either on the note cards that we will come around and collect, or within your chat is that QR code for you to put in your questions, suggestions, and ideas. We're gonna give you like 5 to 10 minutes. We're gonna be up here kind of scrambling, organizing, so we can separate out those cards and questions and make sure we respond to you in the next section. So thank you for your help. I'll be quiet now and give you some time to ask those questions.
All right, I'm gonna turn this off now.
You have your note card ready, just raise them up and we'll come around and collect.
Thank you very much.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, because I voted on it.
Yours were around the, Oh, yeah, I have thought that, yeah, so those will go to our health person.
If not Scott, according to his,
I saw that. They have arms of steel.
I'm bracing them on here, or my belly.
The audio is coming. Thank you, radio. Oh, it's like a shotgun.
Hi, good, how are you?
I'm good. So I almost overheard you offer up an opinion about what will happen to Chauffeur. I'm just curious. Do you think there'll be no competition season?
Okay, there is no competition. That's
For sure.
a done deal.
For both middle school and high school?
Yeah, because the competitions that we go to for middle school, they're not even happening.
Okay.
You know, so, just off the top of my head, Kennedy's not doing it.
Sure. We had a little freak out at our house.
Yeah.
To do Kirkwood, you can't be in band.
Right.
If you're not in band, you're not permitted to be in combat.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not sure that's even going to happen, but it's the best part of school.
Right.
I mean, when you get right down to it,
Right.
that's the reason we go the rest of the year, so
Right.
we can do that.
Right.
So it's just, that's kind of the direction I was
Yep.
expecting, but I hadn't heard anything.
And that's
on
my
the-
question is
on
on this.
the characters.
Yep.
I mean, I can write forever. A lovely friend of mine who goes to Bloomington Normal has
Uh-huh.
a list of, like, I'd like to, like, they don't have to answer these all today, but
Right.
this is the list
Yeah.
from apparently way smarter than I am, that they're using a slightly different program than this Ingenuity, but.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. No, as far as here, I told a parent that has a kid in Kennedy show choir. She's got a sixth grader coming in.
Yeah.
That nothing's been set in stone here,
Right.
but I
it's okay, but I just kind of.
We're gonna bring everybody back together. Still writing down some questions here, but we're gonna start answering. Can I get a thumbs up, a nod, all good on Zoom that you can hear clearly?
Yeah. Why is it thumbs down?
So, okay. I'm gonna talk some more here. Is that better? I'm seeing a few nods. Any better? Not better.
All right, we're starting back up.
Third time's a charm. How about now? Better? Want to make sure everybody can hear clearly? No. I'm getting no's. I'm going to turn up the volume on the computer here. I know I'm told somewhat not to. How about this?
That sounds like your computer, 100%. Mute that one, please.
Leave the computer one off. Okay, off.
Can you hear this one okay, folks? Does that sound better? Okay, hold on 1 second. We're going to switch it over and shade out the computer really fast. And we're going to play. Hold on 1 second.
So we're going to try this again. Oh yeah, that sounds better on this end too. Perfect. So some high overarching questions are the ones I'm going to address. It says, so there is consistency. Is it crystal clear to all staff and students that masks are expected for everyone and parents and guardians? So we're trying to make this very crystal clear. I know some of you are going to be thinking, what happens if people are not wearing them? It's going to be a school expectation. So it's going to be just like if you don't wear an inappropriate t-shirt to school, or if you don't show up to class on time, or push somebody on the playground, any of those types of things. So we are working with the principals on steps 1, 2, 3, 4 of what happens. The plan is then to bring that to the school board just to approve as a procedure, because of course it's not going to stay COVID times forever, but make sure we put that out everywhere. And we're doing this again for health and safety reasons, so the expectation will be across the board. There might be certain cases due to health conditions of individuals that would not be able to happen, but the majority of everyone will be able to wear a face mask or a shield, and some people will probably choose to wear both. So we have thought through that and feel like we're in a good place with that. The next one. What is an event that would change the situation, either going back to normal or going all virtual? So I'm going to talk about this both ways. Our plan is to have options. If Lynn County Public Health or if the governor again closed down the state, we would shift from having those options of in-person due to health and safety and shift back to a school closure. At this time, we don't think that's going to happen. It doesn't mean it can't. As you know, this is an ever-changing fluid position. On the other end, what would change us to going back to the full model of in-school? They find a vaccination for this. Cases all go down. Public health tells us, you know, it's a safe situation. We can make adjustments. We are working closely with Lynn County Public Health on all of that guidance. Also with the Department of Education, it's giving us clear parameters of what their expectations are across the state. So that's where we'll continue to get our guidance from. Extracurricular activities are important to a child's development. What is that plan? So this one's really hard, right? Because we're really working educationally to keep cohorts small and safe. With that said, we know all those extracurricular activities are important. How can we ensure that kids' safety is met? And then we you know, take all those cohorts and mix them together and have all those fall sports and music and speech and drama. At this time, we're still waiting for guidance from the state. That is going to be coming here by the beginning of August, and that guidance will tell us what we can do for high schools with all of their activities and also middle schools, and we will make sure we communicate that out at that time. We see it from both ends. That's a really challenging one. I think I answered that one. What's the tipping point for Cedar Rapids to eliminate the option of in-person learning and return to virtual? This is again where we've been collecting feedback from families and parents, and we know there's people that have strong opinions on one side and strong opinions on the other. We're trying to provide the best of both worlds within that safe environment for staff, for students, and for families. If we can provide those options, that is the method we're gonna do. And we're expecting you as families to make the best decision for you. And for staff, it's all reliant on, again, their health concerns and what their doctors are telling them to do, and we'll work with them as well. We're gonna keep on the theme of health and safety to start with before we move into building specifics. So I'm gonna have Sandy come up here.
Good morning, I'm Sandy Byard and I'm the health services facilitator for the district. And I've got a couple of health and safety questions. The first one, what is our plan for PPE? Do we have enough? Are we ordering more? We already have ordered our PPE. We've ordered enough masks and face shields for all staff and students. We have different vendors that we've had great success with them having the enough to supply our district for all our needs, and that includes hand sanitizer, gloves, some gowns for some of our health office people, that sort of thing. The next part of this question was, how does contact tracing happen? That is done by Lynn County Public Health. Our public health agencies in our state do contact tracing. So basically, when a person tests positive for COVID, Lynn County Public Health gets that notification, and then they contact the person who tested positive and go through who they've been around, where have they been, how much time have they spent with that person, and then they determine who a close contact would be, who would need to quarantine for 14 days. And the definition of a close contact by public health guidelines is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, and it doesn't matter whether you have a mask on or not. So if somebody who is positive for COVID, you've been around them within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, you're going to be considered a close contact. So that would be, if you're living in the household with somebody, you're going to be considered a close contact. And then they move out from the family into where you've been and how much contact you've had with people, and doesn't meet that threshold to be considered a close contact or even to quarantine for 14 days. The next question is, will students be able to return to school after illness without a negative COVID test? Yes. We do have that in our frequently asked questions document that's going to be coming out later this week or next week. I'm not sure when it's going to be coming out. This week? Okay. So based on public health guidelines, they're using symptom-based guidelines for when people can stop quarantine and when they can go back to work and when they can go back to school. So if you don't get a test for COVID, let's say you have symptoms of COVID, you don't get a test, you would be based on symptoms. So it would be 3 days after no fever without fever-reducing medications and a significant improvement in symptoms, and 10 days since your last symptom. So it's 3 parts to that when you don't have a test. If you have a test and you're positive, it's the same thing with symptoms. If you have a test and you test negative, you still have to wait 24 hours to make sure that you don't have fever or symptoms. And we also have to remember that the COVID test is only a point-in-time test, so you can test negative one day and test positive the following day. It's only good for that one day. Just because you test negative on a Tuesday doesn't mean you're not going to be positive by Friday. So people need to keep that in mind too, that it's not an extended period of time. And that's why, and we know there is a lag in some of our testing and getting those back. So on the school point of it, Lynn County Public Health is telling us, don't wait to hear from us that somebody's a close contact. That's why we will be doing preliminary contact tracing just in our classrooms or with staff to say, hey, were you within 6 feet of somebody for more than 15 minutes, and trying to preliminarily start that so we can give people guidance on, and basically it's just going to be, you need to stay home until you get that test result back and you get contacted by Lynn County Public Health. And that's all the questions I have right now. Does anyone have anything in here or anything more on?
Thank you.
So, real quick on that back one, that was actually my question. So, my child, he has a ton of sinus infections, he's got a ton of allergies, and if he is sick and comes home, his symptoms are still COVID symptoms. Do I keep him home for 14 days? Because if I had him tested for COVID every time he was sick, if you look at he's been sick 12 times in one semester.
Right.
That's a lot of testing, that question.
Yep. So the question from an audience member is, students who have chronic sinus infections or allergies or asthma, what are we going to be doing with those students in terms of sending them home for quarantine? If you read the CDC and public health guidelines, all the symptoms of COVID match the symptoms of asthma and allergies and sinus. We do, I did participate in an Allergy and Asthma Network webinar, and they do have an algorithm to try to tell the difference between COVID and asthma, and it's not going to be perfect. I mean, there's not a lot of leeway in terms of, you have these symptoms, you need to stay home for 14 days. You don't have to have a test, but that's something that we definitely are going to be working on, and it's going to be an in-action thing. As the more we see kids and the more we assess kids, if we can kind of wiggle that out, especially knowing if there's a diagnosis in Infinite Campus that the student has asthma and they don't have any other symptoms, you know, we would probably be having conversations with the parent and asking the parent to give the doctor a call, that sort of thing. So it's not going to be easy, and it's not black and white for sure. There's a ton of gray in this. But we will be using that algorithm, and we will obviously be treating kids as symptoms like we did before. But that staying home time period, yeah, it's going to be iffy in the beginning. Yeah.
Another question, are the masks and shields disposable or reusable?
The masks and shields are reusable. We're buying students and staff cloth masks, and the shields are all reusable. You can wipe those down and disinfect those. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Noggle. I'm the Executive Director of HR. I have just a couple of staff questions that came in through the Zoom and here in the audience. The first one is around all of the extra sanitizing that we're doing and the extra cleaning. What does that mean for our custodian staff? So first of all, I just want to say we are so fortunate that we have one of the best staffs anywhere around. And our custodian staff have been working night and day to make sure that our rooms are sanitized, our buildings are sanitized. They will continue to do that. And the real question was, will we be hiring more? Potentially. So if we find that we need more resources, we will certainly do what we need to make sure that we have our safety for our students and our staff is our highest priority. So potentially. The other question that I received then is around our substitute teachers and whether or not we will be hiring more substitute teachers. And the answer to that is yes, always. We are always looking for substitute teachers. We need extra help, and this year will be no different from that. We did have some requirements from the DE that make it a little bit easier for our subs to sub if they'd like to. So if anybody's ever interested in that, we encourage you to go out to our Sub Central and apply for those positions, and we will take all the help we can get. So those were the two staff questions, and I think I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Linda. Most of the questions that I'm fielding are about the virtual options at our different schools. Ryan or Justin, are we able to switch to the middle school slide as an example of those options? Thank you. So the question is, what's the virtual scenario like? And so at the elementary level, actually, let's start at the elementary level, if you don't mind, Ryan. Thank you. Sorry about that. All of our staff members who aren't going to be able to return for health reasons, and all of our family members and students who aren't able to return this year also, who are going virtual, are going to be pooled into a Cedar Rapids remote learning school that's temporary just for this year. So for this year only, you will be able to do all your learning virtually at the elementary level with elementary teachers from Cedar Rapids. So those Cedar Rapids teachers are going to be taking our curriculum and putting it into online modules and creating scheduled time each week for students to interact with their teachers with face-to-face Google Meets, with other peer interactions, with independent practice and reading time, a scheduled time, not like the spring where it's optional, but a required, attendance-driven, graded virtual option by our teachers. It may not be the teacher that you would typically have because we don't have a perfect correlation between students who aren't able to go back and teachers who aren't able to go back in person. And so there will be some difference there, but that option will be in place for the year. And we want you to choose an option for at least the semester so we can staff accordingly. If there's that way we know who's going to be in the virtual option for that period of time. The question came up, what if a school closes? Will those students go virtual or a class has to quarantine? And the answer is yes. Part of the reason we want the virtual option to mirror the in-person option is because if a certain class at a school has to go virtual, those students should be able to move into the virtual option and continue their same learning and their same curriculum and the same courses and things they were working on as if they were going virtual the whole time. So we're trying to make those two paths with Cedar Rapids remote learning and our in-person learning as mirrored as possible so there can be a switch back and forth if we do have an outbreak at a given school. When we go to middle school next. At the middle school level, there is the additional option of the virtual academy. Our virtual academy has been in place for several years, but this year it's new because it's in the fact that it's fully accredited and we can take students from across the state into the program as well. So for grades 6 through 12, if you don't want to be virtual just for this year and you're thinking you want to be in a virtual school longer term, so a year or longer, go ahead and choose the virtual academy. That one is a slightly different curriculum because we're partnering with a national provider called Edgenuity, and so it's going to be a little harder to go in person and virtual academy in that case. So that's the option if you're thinking long-term virtual school for your family, go the Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy route. If you're thinking just for this year, even just for a semester, you want to choose the Cedar Rapids remote learning option, which will be again with the Cedar Rapids teacher in our Cedar Rapids curriculum. So it's a very similar experience as best we can, level to level. And the question was, is the Cedar Rapids remote learning instructor-led? And yes, it is instructor-led. It is going to be, again, scheduled, set times with your Cedar Rapids teacher. And then there's a question about the high school option. At the high school level, there is the virtual academy as well. And I'm going to let Cynthia share a little bit more about the virtual component for their remote option when we get to the high school section. Next question is, if a school must close, will classes switch to remote and keep the same schedule? And yes, we're going to try to keep it the same schedule as is if the school closes. A question is, will students be kept in one room all day with just one teacher? And that is the default method at the elementary and the middle school level. They will be with a single teacher for most of the day. We're still working through the specials, still working through how some of the other things will work. But primarily they will be with a single teacher, and that's again to limit exposure between students and staff to make sure that if there is an outbreak, it's limited to a small area of the school and that we're reducing spread as much as possible. And there's a question of, are we able to switch to virtual during the year? Yes, we are asking families to switch, to pick at least for a semester at a time, so you can switch at the semester mark. If there is an individual need in your house and with your student, we can take that on a case-by-case basis and make a switch if that's necessary as well. All right, with that, the next questions are all level-specific, elementary, middle, and high school, and we're going to do those, and then we'll get to some technology and special education questions.
Thank you, John. At the elementary, really good question. Will recess be allowed? And the answer to that is yes. We have to get the kids outside. What that looks like is undetermined, but there are some ideas that I can share with you. Using that cohort model that John described, we could be looking at fencing, not fencing off, but putting specific locations outside on the playground for different cohorts to play. I guess one of the challenges that we're still working out is in terms of equipment and how that equipment's going to be sanitized if kids are obviously sharing that equipment. We're looking at playground, the big structures of equipment. Are we going to be sanitizing them and how often? So we are working on the recess plan. Another good question about gifted and talented kids, or what we call PACT. Yes, that is being worked on right now. I do see PACT kids getting service either through virtual or on site. We are working on that. Kids on Course, really good question. A number of our buildings have Kids on Course through the Zach Johnson Foundation. Is that going to continue? Well, I actually meet with them early next week. We have to decide, not only Kids on Course, but as a district, how many visitors/community partners are we going to allow in our buildings? That is a big question that's surfacing out there, so we're going to have to make a decision here in the next few days on, at the current state, how many of those partners are going to be allowed in, and if not, how can we still utilize Zach Johnson, which the foundation, because they do tremendous work for us. A daycare question at the elementary. We have a number of daycare or community partners that utilize our buildings, such as Five Seasons, the YMCA, Kids Point, to name a few. The plan right now is yes, we need daycare. Parents need daycare for before and after school. We'll be working with those organizations or partners because obviously they will have to follow the health and safety guidelines that we put forth during the school day. At this time, I think I covered most of those. John Rex.
Sorry, folks, I skipped one or two questions on a card that had multiple. My mistake. The question is around if the state shuts down, will high school students be online with their teachers, or will they be in the Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy? And the answer is they would be with their teachers, not the Virtual Academy. So our default in any time there's a shutdown or quarantine is that students will go to a virtual option with their teachers. The Virtual Academy, again, is a separate school if people want to do that long term, so it would not be our temporary switch. A related question is, how much parent supervision is required to be successful in the Virtual Academy, and how independent does a student need to be? And I'm really glad they asked that question. At both the middle school and the high school level, if a student chooses Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy, rather than having scheduled time with your teacher and your peers and working through your curriculum on a Monday at 9 a.m. being math and Tuesday at 10 o'clock being language arts, you're working fully self-paced. And so students will have a pacing guide that says how many lessons they need to complete. They will have a teacher that's from Cedar Rapids to check in with them and help as needed, but the learning is much more self-directed, much more self-paced, and students can work as fast as they would like to. They do need to keep a minimum pace as they move, but they are able to work ahead if they would like to, and choose which classes on which days they'd like. So there's a lot more flexibility per student, but there's also a lot more accountability and requirements on the student to keep to their schedule as well, because it is self-paced. So there are some differences in terms of if you're choosing the full-time Virtual Academy, that there are some increased expectations on students to manage their time a little differently versus the remote learning, which the Cedar Rapids School District will schedule the time per level with each family. Adam, for middle schools.
Hi, everyone. Going back to the extracurricular activities, one of the questions I got, what if we opt into the virtual, one of the two virtual options in middle schools, or do we still have access to those activities? If we have those activities, yes, you would have full access to what in-person students would get. Vocal music and band, great questions. They will not look like they do traditionally. We're going to try to maintain the skills that our students have and do those in small groups. We put in some mitigation measures. Masks will be required, spacing, special ventilation. So we're going to try to do those, but they won't look like they typically do. Testing for kids, that will all be driven through public health and regular, how any person that has symptoms would get tested. We won't have testing on site. We will be providing face masks, and the kids will, in middle school, will be taking tablets or computers home, Chromebooks. Will middle school students teach in person, or excuse me, teachers teach in person or virtual on smartboard? This is something that we're working through. There's lots of logistics to this, and I imagine there'll be a mixture. But as a cohort or an advisory group, as we're calling them, are in front of a teacher, they will be facilitating learning that was designed by someone else. Whether that be a module that one of their peers creates, or actually live streaming. And we know this is different. And we're really prioritizing safety here. how will staggered lunches and departures look? We're working through all of those plans. We will stagger entry, dismissal, and lunch to maintain those cohorts to ensure that we don't have any cross-contamination. That will be a priority. Next question, did a third party administer or handle the survey and results? No, we did it in-house, and this was for a variety of reasons. Our staff survey was fully anonymous, so in terms of the validity and if anyone's worried about privacy, we didn't collect names on that. It was optional for parents to give those names. This is, like I said, a variety of reasons, one being cost, and two being this is information we need, and it's part of our practice to gather information from our staff and families. And then yes, the data gathered from the 723 survey, will that inform future work? Absolutely. We are still leaving those windows open because we mailed all the surveys home. And so we want to make sure that people who are mailing them back also have the opportunity to weigh in to that survey as well. Is there a possibility for a hybrid option for middle school? The model that we have is really a blend between the virtual and the in-person. So this is the model that we're currently proposing and looking for feedback on. IEP and 504 students in the middle and high school levels still be able to have and meet in their special ed classes, teachers. Every special ed student will have a remote learning plan, and we're going to follow their IEPs to make sure they get their services. How will lunch and buses work? Lunch will be staggered, we'll maintain the cohorts, and with transportation, we will be having mitigation measures to ensure the best safety precautions we can. Masks will be strictly enforced, and we'll rely on sanitation measures to make sure that we're not spreading in those environments. Will students need their usual school supplies in middle school? Yes, and those supply lists will be going out for your review. And can students bring backpacks to school? Yes. We're going to make sure that we're putting all safety precautions in place around lockers and storing the material, so we're doing that in a safe way as well, and more information will come from your individual schools on that front. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to...
All right, so I've got a few questions here. Some are going to be first for Cynthia, who's very popular today, for our high schools, and then we have two questions for Wendy. So Cynthia, are you ready?
If you can hear me okay, yes I am.
All right, we can hear you loud and clear. So your first question, Cynthia, is there still going to be an open campus for high school, like with lunch?
That is something that we've been talking about at the high school level meetings. We don't have a final decision on that. We're taking feedback around the pros and cons, and there are both pros and cons. With in one case, it does eliminate the number of students in a building at a certain time. In another case, it certainly adds traffic in and out of a building. So I would say at this time we don't have a final answer for that decision.
Your next question is, will there be high school sports and activities?
Again, something that is on top of mind for all of us. The Iowa Athletic Association and Girls Union so far have said they are planning for fall activities to take place. More guidance is to come from those associations on July 27th, so we are waiting to see what that might tell us. The athletic directors and activities council certainly continue to plan and work through how to maintain safe activities and athletics. And so at this time, the answer would be yes, the plan is that we will have those. But again, just as our summer activities looked, there are quite a few different ways that we are engaging in those, and even access for spectators and things like that. There will continue to be restrictions around some of those things.
Thank you. Next question. How does the current draft plan for high school students mesh with the governor's mandate that virtual learning is restricted to 50% of the time?
We are also looking at that information that we received. Potentially in our draft, we've got different phases. The AB block schedule model by cohort can go completely online. There is one phase where it suggests that students attend on a continuation, so meaning cohort 1 would attend Monday and Tuesday, cohort 2 would attend Wednesday, Thursday, cohort 1 again attends Friday, Monday, and so on, and then within a 2-week time period, students would be over 50% of the minutes or days in a 2-week time period. So those certainly are things that as information is shared about guidance and guidelines that we need to follow, that our draft continues to be flexible in figuring out if we need to add minutes or if we need to reduce days in a building.
The next question is, will there be orchestra and driver's education?
At this time, yes, we would be planning on offering all of those programs. Again, lots of details that we're working through and how to safely be able to do that. And we are working on plans of what that would be. So at this time, our goal is to still be able to offer the robustness of all the different courses, programs, activities, athletics, co-curriculars, and so on.
Could you tell us about high school busing capacity and high school busing sanitation?
Probably not. I know a little bit about it, but that would probably be a better question for a transportation director or answering it on an FAQ about that. I know they are doing plans for sanitizing between routes, students using hand sanitizer, entering the bus and making sure they have face masks on and so on, but someone else probably could speak more to the details of the transportation than I can.
All right, we have a couple related questions about the high school virtual option, so I'll try to combine them into one large question that you can kind of expand on instead of 3 separate ones. Can you explain the high school classes, the high school online classes that are not Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy? Will they meet every day? Will attendance be taken? How will those work? So just describing the virtual model that's not the CRDA.
So in the current draft, what we did put out there for discussion was for high school students to be able to have access to all courses they may need, and for high school teachers with their specific certifications to still be able to maintain full teaching loads, and knowing that we have several specialized classes and pathways once we get to the high school level, that really we were looking at the ability to maintain access to all of that would come through students signing up for their regular course schedule, and then in that having the choice to attend in person or online. And so in that case, the synchronous learning, the learning that occurs at the same time as other students, would happen on their cohort day. So if that's a Monday and Tuesday, they would show up in person or remote into the class during the assigned class period. And so that would be the synchronous learning. And then on the online days, they would have asynchronous learning, and that's learning that you do at your own pace and at your own time, that there are specific items, activities, curriculum, and so on that you need to complete over that 3-day period in order to prepare for the next synchronous learning days. So that was the original draft that we do want feedback on. Again, the reason for that being the sheer number of courses that we want to be able to maintain at the high school level, access to courses for students and staff, being able to organize and maintain the full FTE teaching load for teachers, and the flexibility in that. If we do look to split those, and certainly we are talking about other options too, and how we can edit the draft, but if we have a remote high school and an in-person high school, that would impact what the master schedule looks like. It also impacts access to some of those classes for both students and teachers. And then ultimately, at any given time, if a student or teacher is in-person teaching and there does have to be a quarantine or someone does need to be home but can still engage in the work, there still is an online element there. And because we know we can't offer the same number of classes both remotely and in person, it just limits what we're able to do. So we are working through and looking at, what is going to be the best opportunity at the high school level so that students can still take all the courses needed to meet graduation requirements and ultimately to prepare themselves for online or post-secondary activities that they want to do.
And we have two final questions for you, Cynthia. One was if AP will be available, and I think we can just say yes based on previous answers. And then the final question is, why are we choosing Friday and not Wednesday for the day out?
Friday is already a district early out day, and I believe that we are maintaining that, and therefore, when we looked at the number of minutes and days and classes, it didn't work out to have Wednesday as an online only day, and then Friday is one of the cohort block scheduled days because it is an early out day. And so therefore it works in our system better K-12 as families are already used to the Friday early out, and then being able to have that day as intervention day. It is an online learning day. That's a day that students and staff can specifically schedule in-person learning again, so we're able to control the number of bodies in a building at any given time.
Thank you, Cynthia. And we have two questions for Wendy. All right, Wendy. Number one, how are 504 needs being met?
Well, 504 needs will be met via their 504 plans. I don't actually know what process we're going through on 504 since that doesn't fall under special services, but I believe it will look something very similar to the IEP, where a 504 plan will need to be looked at and determine what that 504 plan needs to look like when a student is in a virtual environment. And there are 504 coordinators at every building. So I am assuming that the coordinators at each building will need to be facilitating some sort of communication about each of those plans.
How will the transition center work?
We are in conversations about that. Had a conversation yesterday with Sandy Byard, and we are talking about whether or not it will be considered, whether it's safe to be on the city bus, and what about going out to job sites, especially if it's a job site that isn't requiring masks. So we are working through protocols on the transition center. Our goal is to keep as many of our students with the experiences that they currently have, also knowing that if we can't do those things safely, then we are going to have to come up with some alternate ideas for how we get some of those experiences.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, the last question that I got just now was how will we address lost learning from the spring? And so there's two main ways we're thinking about that. First, there are some things that you just have to learn as a kiddo as you're moving through our system. And so we're going to address that in our fall teaching. And so, for example, if you were learning in the spring how to count by tens to 100, you can't suddenly come back in the fall and start counting by 100 to 1,000 because you didn't learn how to count by tens. And so you do need to pick up some of those things that are sequential in nature, particularly at the elementary level. Many things are sequential and need to continue. Same with Spanish or a foreign language. If you didn't learn all your verbs, you didn't learn all your nouns, you can't move into having full conversations if you lost some of that learning. So we're taking many of the concepts and things that were supposed to have been covered in the fourth quarter and figuring out how they can be covered and prioritized in the fall. And so from a curricular standpoint, this is called all the essential learnings. What are the essential learnings you needed as a first grader, as a second grader, as a sixth grader, and how can we make sure that we're still covering those when we return in the fall? We'll also be doing some assessments at the beginning of the fall to find out where student gaps are, and teachers will be differentiating instruction based on where students' needs are. So the first few weeks of school, we will have more assessments to help us understand exactly where our students are and what their learning needs are going to be, and teachers will be responding accordingly to that data. And then finally, there are some classes that were covered in the fourth quarter. If you were taking chemistry and then you moved on to physics, we won't be able to necessarily come back and cover a quarter loss of chemistry if you're never taking chemistry again as a student. So in some cases, there will be classes where the lost learning won't be able to be recovered because students have moved on to a different subject where it's not going to be covered again. So just want to be very upfront about some of those things. And I'm turning it over to Deputy Superintendent Quaker.
All right, a couple additional questions. Our Executive Director of Technology, Craig. One for you is, how will devices be distributed for those who are virtual?
Sure, great question. So our plan is that we're going to distribute devices to home buildings, and they will be distributed there. More details coming, obviously, on scheduling and timetables for that, but they would be picked up from their resident building.
Thanks, Craig. Next question is, will Cedar Rapids Community School District have a COVID-19 waiver? We thought this was a good opportunity for clarification. There is no death waiver, so there's been some social media posts talking about some type of death waiver. There is no such thing, at least not in Cedar Rapids. Some schools are doing liability waivers, and all of those are is people could sign just saying, the school's not liable if you get COVID-19. At this point in time, there's no conversation that Cedar Rapids is doing any type of liability waiver either, but there are some districts doing that type of thing, so the school isn't held liable if somebody gets COVID at some point in time. Additional waiver that you could be asking about is with the Governor Reynolds proclamation on Friday, there was that 50% face-to-face, as I think Cynthia addressed a little bit, and then also virtual options for parents. Right now, our plans, as you could hear, elementary and middle school in their draft, we are well over the 50% because we'd offer in person every day. At the high school, we're close to that, but we're still exploring options there. We believe we can meet it if we need to. And our Superintendent Bush, has been in contact with the Department of Education working on, hey, if this is the safest method for Cedar Rapids and it's a little under that 50%, will the state approve that for us? And we're confident that they would if that happens, that it need be. Sandy's back with some more.
Questions? I've just gotten, and I want to, there's quite a few on this card, and I'll just give you sort of an overview before I answer each specific thing, is that this pandemic is a community pandemic. It's not just us in isolation. So really, the community has a responsibility to keep everybody safe, including our kids and our staff members that come to school each day. So that means, how do you keep people safe? It's wearing a mask. It's washing your hands a lot. It's staying home if you're sick. It's covering your hands and cough, or your coughs and sneezes. It's all those safety, just basic everyday safety measures. So the entire community is kept safe during this pandemic. So the first question is, CDC says 6 foot social distancing is needed in schools. Are you doing that? We will try our best to do social distancing, but we know because of the age of the kids, particularly in PK through 5, it's going to be impossible. Learning environments we cannot plant kids, unless we put cement on their butt, to make them stay away from everybody else. It's just not going to happen. That's why we put other safety measures in effect. So we mitigate that, knowing we can't do social distancing in schools. How do we keep kids safe? How do we keep staff safe? That's why we're requiring masks. That's why we're requiring face shields. That's why there's hand sanitizer everywhere. That's why we want people to stay home when they're sick. So meaning staff is supposed to be screening their health before they come to school. Parents should be screening their students for health before they come to school. Nobody in the entire community should be going out if they're sick with any symptoms at all. So it's just not a school-based thing, it's really a community-based thing. The question about temperature checks. We will not be doing temperature screenings on students before they get on the bus or before they arrive at school for a large variety of reasons. Mainly, again, it's that community thing. We want people to be in their house before they come to school. We don't want them out of their house if they're sick. No touch thermometers have ambient temperatures, so if kids are waiting outside, they are inaccurate. They're not going to give us any information that we need. The other thing is there's lots of research at this point in the current time, before actually today, when the CDC has announced that our cases are likely 10 times more than has been reported in the past because so many people are asymptomatic. Temperature alone is not a great screening method to stop the spread of COVID. That's pretty much proven by research over and over. So there's a ton of other reasons why we're not doing it, but those are the basic. It's not a measure to stop the spread of COVID. It doesn't work that way. Who is going to sanitize rooms each day? A crew needs to be hired to do this, not teachers. We're not asking teachers to sanitize rooms. That will be our custodial department that's responsible for that. And I know the other day at our session during WASH, if it becomes a problem in terms of we are having to sanitize buildings over and over and over, they do have the opportunity to hire extra contracted help. But we will not be asking teachers to sanitize classrooms. Little safety precautions have been offered. Parents will send their kids sick to school. This is a fact. Probably. Yep. And there are sick people standing at Hy-Vee next to at the checkout lane and at Target in the kids' toy aisle. We know that's going to happen. It happens all the time. Yes?
Sure, sir. Quick question. Is there a possibility of having like a checklist put online so parents know what symptoms to look for?
Yep. So that's part of our education plan because we have a lot of education to do with parents so they understand the symptoms, so they know what they're supposed to be doing at home to keep their kids safe and their whole family safe. So absolutely, that's going to happen. So, you know, just like we do for every other illness, we know that parents have to get to work and parents do what they have to do, and we're not criticizing parents because we don't live in anybody else's shoes.
Could you repeat?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Zoom can hear what it was.
Sorry. The question was, are we going to be offering any education to parents in terms of symptoms, what they need to look for at home? Yes, we will. We'll be providing that in a variety of forms on our social media, on our website, news, newspapers, that sort of thing. So when kids present sick at school, we do have a plan for that. And so just like any other day, if a child is sick, they come to the health office. We have plans for isolating sick kids. We have well areas and sick areas. So the well and sick kids are not going to mix. We have isolation areas for students to wait until they're picked up. So we do have a plan in place for when kids get sick during the school day. Last question is 20 people is a goal. Yep. And this is a normal goal for normal times. This is way too many. Again, we know that we cannot maintain that 6 foot of social distancing just because of the way education works. We're trying to keep it as low as we possibly can. That's why we have a lot of other safety mitigation plans in place. That's why we're doing cohorts. That's why we're trying to mitigate the fact that we know that we can't guarantee social distancing in school. And then there was another last question from Zoom, which will be addressed in our FAQs that are coming out, just more specific. There are so many scenarios about quarantine, and if you have symptoms and you tested negative, or if you have no symptoms and tested positive, those will all be spelled out in our FAQs. Again, that's information as of today, and we know that guidelines change from public health all the time. We will keep those documents updated, but when we publish them on a day, that information is good basically for that day, and we'll make sure it's dated. They haven't changed a whole lot with the quarantine and the symptoms, but we don't know what's going to happen because the research is coming out every single day. And when they're looking at the fact that there might be 10 times more positive cases than we knew, that's going to change things when you start looking at statistics and numbers and hospitalizations and positivity rates, and it's all very complicated. But so people understand that we will update that, and the information is accurate as of when we post that information. Thank you. Okay,
me one last question about school lunches. School lunches, whether you're virtual or in person, will be provided. They will be available. That doesn't mean we're delivering them to everyone's home, of course. They will be available within the schools. We will have more information available on the specifics of that online as well. All right. Well, hopefully you at least have some of your questions answered today. Some of our next steps, again, I'm going to stress that FAQ document will be on the website tomorrow. Please make sure you look over that. If you have additional questions, please feel free to email any of us on the team. We forward questions to each other. We will get responses to you. Some things are unknown at this time, as you know, but we have to be making some decisions here pretty quickly. We appreciate your feedback. We appreciate your questions. It's helping guide us and make revisions to our plans. We're going to continue to work with staff and administrators at the building level, continue to put the best plans we can in place. And that first week of August, we will have that final plan of exactly what this looks like in Cedar Rapids. And we're asking all of you as parents to make sure you fill out those surveys and tell us after you have the details whether you're sending your child to school or whether you're going to pick the virtual option at this point in time. We really appreciate your participation, your patience, and your flexibility as you partner with us. Thank you so much and have a great day.